I thought I was part of every milestone in my son's life, until the day I asked when the wedding was, and she said, "We got married yesterday." My heart shattered, my world turned upside down. But that moment taught me the hardest and most important lesson about love, respect, and standing up for yourself. I still remember that morning like it was yesterday. The sunlight was spilling through the kitchen window, painting gold across the countertops. I had my favorite mug in my hands, the one with the faded floral pattern that my mother had given me years ago. I'd poured myself a cup of tea, steeped perfectly, with just enough honey to make it sweet without being cloying. I was excited, in that quiet, anticipatory way that mothers get when something important is coming. My son, Michael, had been acting a little secretive lately, whispering on phone calls, disappearing at odd hours, smiling to himself in a way that made my heart both swell with pride and twist with curiosity. I thought maybe today I would finally get some clarity. Maybe the pieces would fall into place. So I dialed his number, trying to keep my tone casual, light, as if I wasn't about to ask a question that would change everything. "Hey, Michael," I said when he answered. "So when's the wedding?" I almost laughed at myself for asking it so simply. I imagined him pausing, smiling, saying, "Oh, next month, Mom. Don't worry. We'll tell you everything soon." But what I heard instead made my chest seize and my hands tremble. Her voice, Jessica's voice, came from the background. Calm, deliberate, too calm to be innocent. "We got married yesterday." My tea sloshed in the mug. My knees went weak, and I had to grip the edge of the counter to stay upright. My heart was racing in a way I hadn't felt since, I don't even know when. Shock, disbelief, anger, all at once. It was as if the world had tilted sideways, and I was clinging to the edges of reality. I blinked, trying to process the words. "Yesterday?" I asked again, my voice trembling. "What, yesterday? You mean just like that?" "Yes," Jessica replied, as if this were the most natural thing in the world. We didn't want a big fuss. It felt right. It didn't feel right. Not to me. Not to my heart. I sank into the nearest chair, gripping the arms like a lifeline. The sunlight felt harsh now, like it was exposing every secret, every invisible wound. I could feel the tea cooling in my hands, untouched, forgotten. My mind spun in circles. How did I not know? How could they do this without me? And then there was Michael's voice, soft, hesitant, as if he knew he'd crossed a line but didn't know how to fix it. "Mom, we thought it would be simpler this way." Simpler? My son's simpler felt like betrayal. It felt like erasure. They hadn't just made a decision for themselves. They had made it for the entire family without even telling us. I pressed my hands to my face. I could feel my pulse hammering in my temples. My chest tightened. A part of me wanted to scream. Another part of me wanted to curl up and disappear. And yet, somewhere deep inside, a tiny, stubborn ember refused to die. I will not be invisible. I will not be forgotten. That was the moment I realized everything was about to change. My relationship with my son, my place in this family, even my own sense of identity, all of it had shifted in the span of a single, ordinary morning. I sat there in silence, the words echoing in my ears. "We got married yesterday." And with that, a quiet, simmering resolve began to grow inside me. I knew one thing for certain. Life would never feel the same again. I've always been close to my son, Michael. From the moment I first held him in my arms, I knew he was the one piece of my life I could never let go of. There's something about being a mother that makes every little heartbeat matter. Every scraped knee, every whispered secret, every tear and every laugh. It all lodges deep inside you. And as he grew, so did the pride I carried in my chest. Michael wasn't like other kids. He was thoughtful, careful, and sometimes too serious for his age. But he had a spark, a mischievous grin that would appear out of nowhere and melt away all my worries. I always thought we had a bond that nothing could break, a connection stronger than distance, disagreements, or the trials of growing up. Over the years, I watched him become a man. He graduated, moved into his first apartment, and started his career. And somewhere along the way, I met Jessica. I'll admit, the first time I saw her, I didn't quite know what to make of her. She was polite, soft-spoken, careful with her words, almost like she was measuring every syllable before letting it escape. And yet, There was warmth there, too, a quiet confidence, a light in her eyes that reminded me of the way Michael used to smile when he was little. I wanted to like her. I really did, but as a mother, you notice the little things, subtle patterns, whispered phone calls that stopped when I walked into the room, plans Michael made without ever mentioning her, a certain guardedness in Jessica's laugh, like there was always something she wasn't telling me. At first, I told myself it was normal. Every family has secrets, every couple has private moments. Maybe I was just being overly protective, and for a while I tried to ignore the small warnings my heart was giving me. I smiled at Jessica at dinners. I praised her cooking. I told myself she was the right person for my son. I wanted to believe that my family would continue to grow the way it always had, with love, trust, and open doors. But deep down, I had questions. Questions I didn't know how to ask. I noticed Michael growing distant in subtle ways, brushing off my suggestions, making excuses for being busy, laughing too quickly at jokes I didn't understand. I thought it was just adulthood, the natural drifting apart that happens as children leave their parents' orbit. But now I realize those small cracks were warning signs, small hints that life was quietly shifting under my feet, and I hadn't even seen it coming. Family gatherings became more complicated. Jessica would politely smile, but there was always a polite barrier between us. She never fully let me in, and Michael, my son, who once would stay on the phone with me for hours, started making calls that ended abruptly, conversations that felt rehearsed, distant. I told myself not to worry, that perhaps they were just adjusting to new dynamics. But the unease grew inside me, like a seed slowly sprouting roots in my chest. I remember one Sunday afternoon vividly. I had cooked Michael's favorite meal, roasted chicken with herbs, mashed potatoes, the works, and I had set the table like we used to on holidays. I wanted us to have a moment together, just like old times. Michael came in, smiled politely, and said, "Mom, we've got some things planned today." I tried to hide the disappointment. "Oh, what things?" I asked, keeping my voice light. Jessica chimed in, her tone friendly but clipped. "Just some errands. We'll make it up to you soon." Soon. That word gnawed at me. I didn't know then that soon would stretch into something far more permanent than I could have imagined. Even so, I tried to hold on to hope. I reminded myself that families go through phases, that children grow up and sometimes pull away. I told myself that perhaps one day, Michael and Jessica would open that door fully, and we would laugh about all these small misunderstandings. But life, as it often does, had a different plan. The cracks in our family weren't going to fix themselves. They were widening silently, and I didn't realize that the most profound shift, the one that would challenge everything I thought I knew about trust, love, and my place in my son's life, was about to happen in a single, shocking sentence, and that sentence would come without warning. It all began that morning with what I thought would be an ordinary call, the kind of phone conversation I had 100 times before with my son. I was humming softly as I dialed his number, imagining that today, maybe, we'd sit down together over coffee and talk about wedding plans, about life, about the things that mattered to us as a family. When he picked up, I felt a wave of relief. "Hey, Mom!" His voice sounded cheerful, but there was something different in it, something I couldn't place. "Hey, Michael," I said warmly. "So, when's the wedding? I was thinking we could celebrate soon. Maybe a little family dinner?" There was a pause. Not the usual brief pause before he replied. This one was heavier. His voice was quieter, almost hesitant. Then came her voice, Jessica's voice. Calm, controlled, that soft, polite tone that somehow cut sharper than a blade. "We got married yesterday." I froze mid-breath. The cup of tea I'd been holding clattered onto the counter. A cold rush of disbelief shot through me, and my knees threatened to buckle. My living room, once bright and warm with morning sunlight, felt suddenly unfamiliar, alien, and confining. I stared at the phone as if it were some foreign object delivering an impossible message. Yesterday, my mind refused to compute. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog. What? I managed to choke out. "Yes," Jessica said again, almost serenely. "We didn't want a big fuss. It just felt right." The words repeated themselves in my mind, bouncing off the walls, echoing with cruelty. Just felt right. How could they? How could my son, my firstborn, and this woman I had tried so hard to accept, make a decision of such magnitude without me, without anyone in the family? I sank into the nearest chair. My hands flew to my face, my fingers trembling uncontrollably. My heart was hammering so loud I was sure they could hear it through the phone. My mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, but no words came out. Michael's voice, hesitant, almost apologetic, finally broke the silence. "Mom, I know it's sudden. I didn't think it would upset you this much." Upset? My chest tightened. It wasn't just upset. I felt betrayed, invisible, erased from a moment that should have been monumental. A mother's heart, the heart that had held him close for decades, suddenly felt as if it had been ripped out and set aside, unacknowledged. I wanted to scream, to cry, to throw the phone across the room. But instead, I clung to the counter, my knuckles white, my mind spiraling. Every memory of Michael as a child, his first steps, his first words, the late-night talks we used to have, all of it suddenly felt tainted. It wasn't just a wedding, it was a signal that my voice, my presence, my love, had been sidelined in a life I thought I was inseparable from. Jessica's laugh, light and unbothered, drifted through the phone. "We didn't want to stress anyone," she said. It was private. A small ceremony, nothing fancy. I wanted to tell her that it wasn't about the size of the ceremony. It wasn't about the fancy dresses or the cake. It was about me being part of my son's life, part of a moment so sacred that I should have been included. I wanted to scream that family wasn't supposed to be left in the dark. I could feel my vision blur with tears. I pressed my forehead against the wall and whispered, more to myself than to anyone on the phone, "How could you do this?" Michael tried to explain again, stumbling over his words. "Mom, it was sudden. We got caught up. We didn't want drama. We just thought it would be simpler this way." Simpler. Simpler. The word rang in my ears like nails on a chalkboard. Simpler for them, perhaps. But for me? For the mother who had raised him, who had dreamed about holding his hand as he walked down the aisle, who had imagined celebrating this day with laughter, tears, and family. It was a wound I didn't know how to heal. I remember hanging up the phone, trembling, my hands shaking so violently I could barely lift my mug to take another sip of tea. The room spun. The sunlight outside no longer seemed comforting. It felt harsh, exposing, accusing. My heart ached in ways I didn't know were possible. I thought about the day I had first met Jessica, about the times I had tried to connect with her, to make her feel like part of our family. I thought about the dinners, the little gifts, the conversations I had tried to spark. And now, all of that effort felt invisible, irrelevant. It wasn't just the act of marrying in secret. It was the disregard, the erasure, the quiet message that my opinion, my feelings, my presence, my existence in this pivotal moment of my son's life didn't matter. That morning marked the moment I realized that nothing would ever be the same. The cracks I had ignored in our family were no longer subtle. They had erupted into a chasm, and I, standing in my living room, holding cold tea and shaking with disbelief, knew that I had a choice, either crumble in silence or rise and reclaim my place, my voice, my love, not just for Michael, but for myself. It was the moment everything changed, and I couldn't turn back. The days after the call were the hardest I'd experienced in years. Every morning I woke up hoping it had all been a bad dream, but it wasn't. The truth was painfully, undeniably real. My son and his wife had married in secret. My heart felt like it was carrying a weight that no mother should have to bear. At first, I tried to process it quietly. I told myself, maybe they didn't mean to hurt me. Maybe this was just their way of doing things. But the more I tried to convince myself, the more the pain grew. Each time I saw a picture of their smiling faces on social media, each post from the private ceremony I wasn't invited to, it felt like a fresh cut reopening. Michael tried to explain again in person a few days later. We met at a cafe, the one we used to frequent when he was still living at home. I had pictured it as a reunion, a chance to reconnect, to understand. But when he walked in with Jessica at his side, so confident, so calm, I felt a jolt of anger that I couldn't contain. She greeted me politely, but there was a stiffness to her smile that made me feel unwelcome. I noticed how Michael held her hand, tightly, possessively, like he was protecting something I'd never be allowed to touch again. I forced a smile and tried to start the conversation lightly. "So, tell me about the ceremony. What was it like?" Jessica's answer was courteous but distant. "It was intimate. Just family and a few friends." I forced myself to nod. "Just family." "Right." My voice cracked slightly. I wanted to ask more, to push for details, to feel included in their joy. But every attempt felt like hitting a wall. They were distant, closed off, impenetrable. Michael leaned forward, as if sensing my rising frustration. "Mom, we didn't want drama." "That's all? Drama." The word echoed in my ears like a slap. I wanted to scream that wanting to be included, wanting to share your joy with your mother, is not drama. I wanted to shake him, to make him understand that this wasn't a minor slight. This was a deep wound in our family's foundation. Instead, I swallowed the lump in my throat, nodding politely, smiling through the tightness in my chest. Inside, I felt my control slipping. I began to doubt myself. Had I been overreacting? Was I imagining the hurt, exaggerating my pain? Maybe they truly didn't intend to hurt me. Maybe I was being too sensitive. But the small daily interactions made it clear. This was not my imagination. They were avoiding me in subtle ways. Phone calls went unanswered. Texts were brief and clipped. Social media photos were filled with happiness and laughter that I was barred from sharing. The secret wedding wasn't just an event. It was a statement. You are not part of this decision. You are not part of this moment. The loneliness gnawed at me. I began second-guessing every interaction I had had with them, replaying every conversation, every dinner, every smile. I questioned my judgment, wondering if I had done something wrong. Maybe I hadn't been motherly enough. Maybe I'd been too intrusive, too protective, too present. Even the little things, invitations, cards, messages, became painful reminders. A wedding invitation arrived in the mail a week later, just the two of them. A small envelope with our family name printed neatly on it. No note, no personal touch, no acknowledgement that my heart had been shattered days before. I stared at it for hours. My hand shook as I held it, and I felt a quiet rage simmering beneath the sadness. I wanted to throw it across the room, rip it into pieces, scream at the unfairness of it all. But I didn't. I couldn't. I was trapped between the love for my son and the anger I felt at the betrayal. Family gatherings became unbearable. Jessica would smile politely, Michael would nod, but the warmth I remembered was gone. I felt invisible, like a shadow in my own life, and the more I tried to reach them, the more distant they became. Every polite excuse, every carefully chosen word, reinforced the fact that my pain didn't matter. Friends noticed my quiet withdrawal. Lila called me one evening, concern in her voice. "You've been distant," she said softly. "What's going on, honey?" I wanted to tell her everything. The hurt, the betrayal, the feeling of being erased. But the words lodged in my throat. Instead, I muttered something vague about family tensions and tried to laugh it off. But the truth was I felt lost. My sense of belonging, my connection to my son, even my understanding of family, had been shaken to its core. And yet, amidst all this turmoil, there was a spark inside me that refused to die. Every time I felt invisible, I reminded myself that my voice did matter, that my love, my pain, my perspective, all deserved acknowledgement. But it was exhausting. Every attempt to assert myself was met with calm dismissal or polite deflection. I was caught in a storm of emotional neglect, isolation, and self-doubt. By the end of the week, I realized that the secret wedding wasn't just a single event. It was a symbol of something larger, a quiet erosion of trust, communication, and respect. And the struggle I faced wasn't just with them, it was within me. How could I navigate this heartbreak without losing myself completely? How could I confront the betrayal while maintaining the dignity and love I still felt for my son? The answer wasn't clear yet, but I knew one thing: I couldn't stay silent forever. It was late one evening when everything finally came crashing down. The house was quiet, the way it always felt these days, empty and echoing, even though Michael and Jessica had been home just hours before. I sat alone at the kitchen table, the dim light casting long shadows across the floor. my fingers tracing the grain of the wood absent-mindedly. I stared at the stack of unopened cards, the tiny framed photos of my son growing up, the little souvenirs of a life I thought was shared and cherished. Everything seemed like a relic from another time, a time when my presence mattered, when my love had been enough. Now, those same memories felt like a cruel joke. I couldn't hold back the tears any longer. They spilled freely, hot and relentless, burning my cheeks. My chest felt like it had been compressed in a vice. The betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was physical. Every heartbeat hammered against my ribcage, a painful reminder of the wound that had been inflicted on me by the two people I loved most. I whispered Michael's name, almost like a prayer, almost like a plea. "Michael, how could you? How could you let this happen without me? Don't you see what you've done?" The silence in response was deafening. It was as if the house itself had swallowed my words, leaving me to wrestle with the weight of my own heartbreak. I thought back to the first time I had held him as a baby, the softness of his skin against mine, the tiny fingers curling around my own. I remembered his first steps, his first words, every milestone I had celebrated with joy and love. And now it felt as if all that shared history had been disregarded, erased in a single devastating act. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run to them and shake them until they understood the depth of my pain. But the voice that had been a constant source of comfort to me, the voice that told me I was strong, that I could endure anything, was silent. I felt completely alone, and in that solitude I began to question myself. Had I overstepped as a mother? Had I been too involved, too attentive? Was this my fault in some way? The thoughts churned relentlessly, each one cutting deeper than the last. I felt small, invisible, like a shadow at the edge of my own life. I thought of the wedding photos I had seen online. Michael smiling, Jessica radiant, friends and family celebrating, and I felt a stab of humiliation. That should have been my moment to share in, my joy to feel. And yet, I was nothing more than a distant observer, excluded from one of the most significant events of my son's life. I pressed my face into my hands, trying to stifle the sobs that racked my body. Every emotion collided inside me: grief, anger, disbelief, betrayal. It was too much. The weight of it all threatened to crush me. I felt hollow, like someone had scooped out the center of my heart and left an empty shell behind. Hours passed. I sat there trembling, staring at the dimly lit kitchen, feeling the depth of my isolation. And then, in the quiet, a thought pierced through the haze of despair. I cannot let this break me. I am still here. I am still a mother. I am still me. It was a fragile spark, barely noticeable against the storm of pain, but it was enough. Enough to make me realize that I couldn't stay silent, couldn't let this injustice go unacknowledged. I owed it to myself and to my son to find my voice again. The next day, I confronted Michael and Jessica. Not with shouting, not with anger, but with raw honesty. My voice trembled, but my words were clear. I feel hurt. I feel erased. I should have been part of this. My presence, my love, my involvement, it matters, and you ignored it. For the first time, I saw hesitation in their expressions. Michael looked away, guilt flickering across his face. Jessica's calm demeanor faltered. My words had reached them in a way my silent suffering never could. I realized then that this breaking point, this moment of deepest despair, was also a turning point. I could either let it destroy me, or I could use it to reclaim my strength, my voice, my dignity. The house was still quiet afterward, but I no longer felt crushed. The storm inside me had not passed, but it had shifted. Pain remained, yes, but alongside it was something new. Clarity, awareness, the understanding that I could grieve and still be strong. That I could demand respect without sacrificing love. Sitting there at the kitchen table, I finally allowed myself to breathe. I didn't know what would come next, or how long it would take for the wounds to heal. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I would not allow this betrayal to define me. I would not disappear from the life of my own family. That night, as I finally lay down to sleep, exhausted but determined, I whispered into the dark, not to anyone else, but to myself. I will stand. I will be seen. I will be heard. No one can take that away from me. And with those words, something inside me shifted. The breaking point had been reached. And now, the journey toward awakening and reclaiming my life could begin. The morning after that night of tears, I felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and clarity. The darkness of despair had not yet lifted entirely, but somewhere inside me, a small ember of resolve was beginning to glow. I realized that if I allowed myself to sink further into sadness, I would risk losing more than just my peace. I could lose my sense of self entirely. I decided to reach out to Lila, my oldest and dearest friend. Leela had always been my anchor through life's storms. She had seen me through heartbreak, through joy, and through countless moments when I had doubted myself. When I told her everything, the secret wedding, the exclusion, the betrayal, she didn't gasp in shock, or try to immediately solve the problem. She just listened. She let me pour out the frustration, the grief, the helplessness that had been bubbling inside me. And then she said something that cut straight to my core. Mom, you have to take your place. You can't wait for them to recognize it. You need to stand up for yourself. You need to be seen, not for revenge, not for anger, but because your voice matters. You exist in this family, and you deserve to be acknowledged. Her words ignited something in me that had been dormant for too long. I realized I had been waiting for permission to feel hurt, to feel anger, to feel betrayed. But there was no permission needed. My feelings were valid, my voice mattered, my presence mattered, and I didn't need anyone else to give me those rights. I spent the next few days reflecting on what I truly wanted. I wanted connection with my son, yes. I wanted understanding, recognition, and inclusion. But I also wanted something more fundamental, respect. And I understood that respect would not simply be given. It had to be claimed. I began writing. I wrote letters to Michael and Jessica, pouring out every feeling I had been holding inside. I didn't hold back. I told them how it felt to be erased, to be sidelined, to discover their life-altering decision after the fact. I shared memories, my love, and my heartbreak. I expressed my need to be part of their lives in a way that was honest but not hostile. Writing those letters was transformative. With every word, I felt a little lighter. Every sentence was a reclaiming of my power. Every paragraph reminded me that I was more than my grief. I was a mother, a woman, a person with feelings that deserved acknowledgement. Then, I took another step. I reached out to Michael directly, not to argue, not to demand, but to request a conversation, a real conversation, one where I could be heard and where we could attempt to bridge the gap that had formed between us. When we finally spoke, the tension was palpable. Michael's initial defensiveness was strong, but I held steady. I spoke with clarity, with calm determination, and with vulnerability. I need to be part of your life, I told him. Not because I want to control it, not because I want to interfere, but because I love you. Because being sidelined hurts. Because family isn't just about the two of you making decisions. It's about all of us sharing these moments together. For the first time, I saw his eyes soften. I saw the guilt flicker, the understanding that perhaps he had not fully grasped the magnitude of my pain. Jessica, too, began to see me differently. I think she realized that my anger was not about opposition, but about love. That my insistence on being present was not criticism, but a mother's yearning to connect. It was not an overnight miracle. The walls were still there, tentative and fragile, but the cracks in them began to form. I could see glimpses of reconciliation, of understanding. And as those small moments unfolded, a smile, a gentle touch, a shared conversation, I felt the weight of despair begin to lift. Through it all, I reflected deeply. I realized that this experience, painful as it had been, was teaching me something vital. Life may not always honor your expectations, and people may make choices that hurt you, sometimes deeply. But you always have the power to reclaim your voice, to assert your worth, and to demand respect without losing love. I began to understand that awakening is not always dramatic. It doesn't always come with fireworks or sudden revelations. Sometimes it comes quietly, in the steady acknowledgement of your own feelings, in the conscious decision to stand, to speak, and to refuse invisibility. By the time a week had passed, I felt stronger. I felt seen. Not because they had immediately changed, but because I had reminded myself of my own value. I had reasserted my presence in my son's life and, most importantly, in my own life. And in that awakening, I found something more precious than relief. I found a quiet joy in knowing that, no matter what the world or my family did, I could stand tall. I could feel deeply, love fully, and still honor myself. It was the moment I realized that my power had always been inside me. The secret wedding hadn't taken it away. It had only forced me to notice it. After days of reflection, conversations, and heartfelt letters, I finally realized that justice wasn't about punishment. It wasn't about shaming Michael or Jessica, or holding grudges that would only weigh me down. The justice I sought was recognition for my feelings, my love, and my rightful place in my son's life. I decided to approach the situation calmly, deliberately. I called Michael and asked him to meet me at the park, a neutral place where we could talk openly. The sky was soft and gray, the kind of gentle overcast that seems to slow down the world. I wanted our conversation to be measured, honest, and intentional, not fueled by anger, but by clarity. When he arrived, I took a deep breath, letting the cool air fill my lungs. I looked at him, at the man he had become, and I spoke from the heart. "Michael," I began, "I love you more than anything. That will never change. But I need you to understand how deeply hurt I was when I found out about your wedding, not just the secrecy, but the fact that I was left out of something so important. My presence, my voice, it matters. I am your mother, and I deserve to be part of your life, fully and openly." His eyes softened. I saw regret there, a dawning awareness that perhaps he had underestimated the depth of my pain. "Mom," he said slowly, I didn't think about it like that. We just thought we were sparing you, that it would be easier this way." Easier. That word again, but this time it didn't sting. Instead, I gently corrected him. "Nothing about being excluded is easy, Michael. Love isn't about avoiding discomfort. Love is about sharing your life, your joys, your milestones, and I want to be part of that. I want to celebrate with you, not in secret, but openly." Jessica joined us after a moment, her expression hesitant but open. I didn't realize how much this hurt you," she admitted. Her voice was quiet but sincere. "I'm sorry." Hearing those words, a wave of relief washed over me. I felt my shoulders, which had been weighed down by grief and tension for days, finally relax. For the first time since discovering their secret wedding, I felt a sense of balance returning. This wasn't about victory over them. It was about restoring my dignity and place in my family. Over the next few weeks, boundaries and understanding were re-established. Michael and Jessica began including me in their plans, from family dinners to casual weekend visits. They sought my input, asked my advice, and most importantly, they listened. And with every shared laugh, every story retold over coffee, every quiet moment of connection, I felt the bridge between us being rebuilt. It wasn't perfect. Trust doesn't heal overnight, and wounds take time to mend. But I had reclaimed my voice. I had reclaimed my power. I was no longer invisible, no longer sidelined. My heart, once heavy with betrayal, now carried hope, resilience, and the renewed certainty that love and respect can coexist. I also learned an important lesson about myself, that setting boundaries and asserting your worth doesn't diminish love. It strengthens it. I could grieve. I could feel hurt. I could demand recognition and still love my son fiercely and unconditionally. In the quiet moments, I would sit and reflect on everything that had happened. The pain had been necessary. It had forced me to examine my own boundaries, my own self-respect, and my own capacity to heal. And I realized that, in the end, justice isn't about retribution. True justice is about claiming your place in the world, honoring your feelings, and refusing to let anyone diminish your worth. By the time the months passed, the family dynamic had shifted. Michael and Jessica had become more transparent, more considerate, and more inclusive, and I, in turn, had found a steadiness I hadn't felt in years, a quiet power that comes from knowing who you are, what you deserve, and that your voice can never be silenced. No matter what happens, that was my resolution. Not revenge, not confrontation, but reclamation, of my dignity, my love, and my rightful place in my family's life. And in that reclamation, I found a peace I hadn't thought possible after such a betrayal. Sitting here now, reflecting on everything that happened, I realize that life doesn't always follow the script we imagine for ourselves. Sometimes it surprises us. Sometimes it hurts us in ways we never expected. And sometimes, the people we love the most unintentionally cause the deepest wounds. But through all that pain, I discovered something essential. My worth is not defined by anyone else's actions. My love is not diminished by betrayal. My presence cannot be erased when I claim it fully. Life will throw moments at you that feel unfair, moments that threaten to shake the foundation of your heart. But those moments also hold lessons about strength, resilience, and self-respect. I learned that love is not about avoiding discomfort. Love is about honesty, communication, and mutual respect. It's about being present, not just in body, but in heart and mind. I learned that boundaries are not walls that separate us, but bridges that allow relationships to grow stronger, healthier, and more meaningful. And I learned something else. Awakening doesn't always come with fanfare. Sometimes it comes quietly, in a moment of reflection, in the decision to speak your truth, in the realization that you deserve acknowledgement and respect. Sometimes it comes after tears, after heartbreak, and after long nights of questioning everything you thought you knew about your life and your family. Through this journey, I found my voice again. I found the courage to stand tall even when I felt invisible. I found the wisdom to navigate pain without losing myself. And in doing so, I discovered a profound truth. The most important relationship we have is with ourselves. When we honor our feelings, our dignity, and our presence, we give love a chance to flourish, both for ourselves and for the people we care about. Life will continue to surprise me. Michael and Jessica will make mistakes, as we all do. But now I know that even when I feel hurt, even when life blindsides me, I can navigate it with strength, grace, and compassion. I can remain loving while also remaining firm in my worth. And that is a power no one can take away. To anyone listening who has ever felt invisible, sidelined, or hurt by the people they love, remember this: your voice matters. Your feelings matter, and even when life blindsides you, you can reclaim your space, your dignity, and your heart. If you liked my story, please share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more real-life stories like this. Remember, love is a gift, but respect is a necessity. Stand firm, speak your truth, and never let anyone make you feel invisible. Life may surprise you, but your strength will always carry you forward. And as I close this chapter, I smile quietly, knowing that though the secret wedding shook my world, it also awakened me to the power of my own voice, the resilience of my heart, and the unshakable truth that I will always matter in the lives of those I love. Life doesn't always go the way we expect. Sometimes it surprises us, sometimes it hurts. But even when you're hurt, even when you feel invisible, your voice matters. Stand tall, speak your truth, and never let anyone erase your presence. If you liked my story, share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more heartfelt real-life stories like this.